What's happening, folks? Welcome back to another episode of Scottish Guy Goes Slowly Insane in an apartment in Philadelphia. In today's video, I'm gonna compare something that I don't give a shit about. I'm gonna compare whether the Fuji X-T2 stands up in image quality to the 5D Mark IV. The reason I don't care about this is because I am happy with the image quality on both of these cameras, and I've never really had a problem with what either of them put out, so I don't really care what the result is, but I'm gonna do this because these are two cameras that I have, and sometimes people wonder if a much cheaper crop sensor camera can beat an expensive full frame camera. Anyways, so I've took different pictures at different ISOs with the same settings on each camera and the same focal length. Starting at ISO 100 on the Canon and the low ISO setting on Fuji because its base ISO is 200, so maybe not quite a fair comparison at this point. But starting here, I just made all these pictures of this corner of this room. So we've got relatively high dynamic range, we've got bright areas outside and dark shadows inside. And all I'm going to do is just add a little bit of exposure, like about a half a stop. I'm going to try pulling the highlights all the way down and pull the blacks all the way up and just see how things look. I think things look a little bit soft here. This is the Canon file, and this is probably because the lens isn't as sharp wide open, and also it was too slow of a shutter speed for what I should be shooting with that focal length. And also it's going to have a more shallow depth of field than the Fuji has because it's full frame and the other one's a crop sensor. So dynamic range looks fine, image quality is fine, the colors look nice. Moving to the Fuji, we'll just hit previous, get the exact same settings. Fuji clearly looks sharper, and there's also the lens on the Fuji is the same focal length equivalent, but it's got more depth of field because it's 56 instead of an 85, and also the lens is more expensive than the one that was on the Canon, so I guess I should expect it to be sharper in that case. But this isn't really a test of sharpness, it's just kind of more interested in the dynamic range and how they both stand up. So low ISOs, they both look good. Move on to ISO 200. I did this because it's the base for Fuji, otherwise I would have skipped this. So this is the Canon file again. Looks good, very little difference. It brightens up okay. It's a little bit sharper here, probably because the shutter speed's slightly faster. That's fine. Go on to the Fuji, and that looks good too. No issues there. Image quality looks fine, there's no grain really showing up. One thing I was surprised about is the Canon file seems to be a little more green than the Fuji file. I always thought the Fuji would have more of a green cast than Canon. Canon tends to look a little pink, but I actually think the Fuji looks pinker than the Canon does. Alright, so we're moving up here. I just skipped up to 1600 ISO, so go half a stop, bring those highlights down, bring the shadows up. This is Canon, starting to see a little bit of grain here with the 5D Mark IV. Things are much sharper now. I'm stopping the lens down to 4.5 so you can see it's much more sharp. So I do have Lightroom sharpening on, and I think I'm gonna get rid of that just in case that affects how the files look at any point. I think if we take the sharpening off. And another thing I don't have on Canon is profile corrections on. It doesn't have much difference there. With the Fuji it's already built in. I'll hit previous, so it doesn't make any difference there. Starting to see the grain a bit more, I think, with the Fuji file. So in the Canon it's very fine there, but it does have more megapixels, so the 1:1 is a little different, and the grain is probably going to show up a little bit finer, I think. But not a big difference at all. They both look good. Actually, the Canon punches in further because at 1:1 it's 30 megapixels, so Fuji's got noticeably more grain at that point, but not so much that I am going to be mad about it. Alright, moving on to 6400 ISO. This is the Canon file again. So we'll add half a stop, bring those highlights all the way down, bring the shadows up. There's a good amount of grain with the Canon file there, still quite fine. It's not really destroying the file yet, nothing's falling apart. And this is the Fuji one. Losing a lot of contrast now with the Fuji, you can start to see that grain really showing through. things look a little bit less clean than the Canon one. Definitely Fuji's not holding up as well. Once again, it doesn't bother me so much that I wouldn't use it. A lot of people hate seeing grain in photos, but I would personally just maybe not lift the shadows up as much, put some contrast back into it, and I would be fine to use that file. You could use some noise reduction if you really wanted rid of the grain, but it doesn't bother me that much. So let's move on. The highest setting that I did, which was 12,800. I think beyond that, I think we can accept that they're all going to look grainy. Starting with Canon again, we'll add a half stop, take the highlights out, lift the shadows. Very little contrast doing this, and noticeable grain without even zooming in. A lot of people would consider this unusable, but as always, I feel like with a little bit of contrast, don't raise the shadows and highlights up so much. Put the blacks in there. I feel like that would be fine. If you're in a situation where you need to use that high of an ISO, then you'll get away with that. I don't think you'd want to be using it all the time. It's not bad. It's not too bad. I need to put it back to where it was before. There we go. So moving on to the Fuji file, previous, and the Fuji one is it's not looking too good here. It's looking very grainy. Definitely a lot of people would consider this completely unusable. Again, you probably shouldn't be adjusting a raw file at this sort of ISO quite this much. Maybe just leave it a little bit dark, hides that grain slightly. It's still very grainy there. Probably needs some noise reduction at this point. Kind of softens it out a little bit. Needs to, there you go. I would use that. I don't think it's the worst ever. Definitely I wouldn't want to use it all the time again, but you're out shooting street photography or something, I think ISO 12,800 is usable. It's fine. You're probably not going to be printing that big, and often when you print you don't really see this digital noise as much. It's kind of forgiving in print. Canon file at 12,800 and the Fuji at 12,800. With the adjustments, it's really different there. Canon actually pulls it off much better. It's also a brighter file for some reason. That's Fuji at 12,800. Let's compare that with Canon. I want to see Canon at 12,800 and Fuji at 6,400. It's a bit more comparable there. The laptop's taking a long time to catch up. So that might be useful to some people if you're wondering about buying Fuji to replace your Canons for wedding photography or something like that. If you're a person who really hates to see grain and uses high ISOs a lot, then Fuji might not be the way to go. You might want to stick with Canon. So if you'd been thinking about switching from Canon to Fuji for that smaller camera size, that more tactile sort of old school feel, then it might be worth thinking about if you shoot mostly at lower ISOs. If you do tend to shoot weddings and you use high ISO a lot and you hate grain, then you might want to stick with Canon for a while until either they improve the technology or take a look at Sony or something like that. But if you don't really care, if you kind of like the grain, then Fuji's a great choice. It still produces pretty usable files at 6400. And it's probably kind of subjective at 12,800 if you're okay going that high. I've shot a lot of street photos at 12,800 and I don't mind them at all, having some grain in them. At the end of the day, I would rather get the shot and use 12,800 than not get the shot at all. So long story short, the Fuji does not have as good high ISO performance. The image quality drops off and the Canon 5D Mark IV beats it at that. If you enjoy this kind of video, let me know in the comments. I was thinking about also comparing the Fuji to the 5D Mark III. They're a little bit closer in price. The 5D Mark III is a bit older and definitely doesn't perform as well with higher ISOs as the Mark IV. If people are interested in this, I would also be happy to do a similar comparison with the Mark III and the X-T2. So let me know if that is something that you care about. If you enjoy my videos, check out this playlist up in the corner here, watch a few more of my videos, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.